Hello YouTube! Around 3 years ago, I put out a video about the Hori Fighter N64 mini controller for the Nintendo 64, and I said it was the best controller that money could buy for the Nintendo 64, but the one issue with it being that it costed a lot of money. Now, our fine friends at Retrobit has finally perhaps solved the problem of the Hori Mini N64 controller costing a lot of money by making this fateful adaptation, or tribute as they call it, controller that's designed and aesthetically looks just like that one. Is it just as good as that one, or is it worse? Let's find out today. Alright, so taking a look at the controller, I went for a aquatic blue, I believe is what they call it. There's also a green color and a stock red color where it's just, normal red and not transparent like this. I went with blue because blue is my favorite color. But yeah, though, so taking a look at the controller, it on the surface looks very similar to the Hori pad. The couple of differences you can note is, first off, the Hori pad used a rubber start button. This one uses a plastic one, and it's also a little bit bigger than the Hori one, which I actually like because the Hori one's rubber, I don't know, I just never really cared for it too much. But the button arrangement and everything is the same. They used the same oversized GameCube style thumbstick as the Hori pad, which is also really nice. And another thing that they changed is the D-pad. The D-pad on the Hori controller was really small, and was my one complaint with that controller, was that it was just too small and I didn't like it very much. Here it's a little bit bigger. It's still not as big as I would like, and I still don't really care for its placement being, so close to the A and B buttons, but it's better. It's still not great, but it's better. And another change they made is the Z button. So the Z button on the Hori controller were just these small little strips of plastic. Here they're a lot closer to how modern video game Z buttons would be, in the sense that they're big enough for you to fit your trigger fingers on and everything like that. And they feel really nice. I really like pressing them, as you guys can tell. That's why I've been just doing that like crazy. So overall, they nailed the feeling and look of the Hori pad. They also did something really cool. That's with the cable. This cable is 10 feet long, which blows the Retro Fighters Brawler 64 pad out of the water, which only had, I think, 2 feet of cable. This has a nice, good 10-foot long cable, so you can just get as far away from your TV, if you're like me, and, just play your games. And also, another thing I have to compliment is the build quality on this thing. It feels very solid. This feels like very sturdy plastic. The thumbstick and everything feels really great. It's just very solidly built. So, how's it hold up for video games? So, I've had this pad for about 2 months now, and right away, one of the first things I noticed about it is that it's actually a little bit more sensitive than the standard Nintendo 64 controller, or even the Brawler 64 pad. Now, I don't personally enough think that this is a huge problem or anything like that. I actually don't mind the oversensitivity, just because I don't notice it very much. I've played through several games at this point using this controller, including this copy of Super Mario 64 that you guys are seeing the last level of, and I just never really felt like the oversensitivity of the analog stick was actually a problem. I figured for this video's sake I should play some games I'm not as familiar with, but are kinda standard Nintendo 64 games, or well, standard gaming games in general. So I started with Xtreme G, which is a game I have only played a couple times before this. It's kind of like a poor man's F-Zero, but it has some interesting things, like there's weapons. I'm not good at this game, but I played a decent amount of it with this controller, and I didn't feel like this controller was making me worse at the game, if that makes sense. I felt like I was failing due to my own failures as a player. Next up, I played some Mario Tennis, and again, I just didn't feel like any of my shortcomings were because of the oversensitivity of the analog stick. I felt like it was because of my own inadequacy as a player, which again is kind of normal for a game like this that requires a decent amount of skill to be pretty good at, I suppose. And lastly, I played some Pilotwings 64, which is a game I really like, but I am very bad at. I don't know why, but I am just very bad at Pilotwings, just landing stuff precisely. Has just never been my forte in video games, but I like the game. Like, it's very chill, and I very much enjoy it. I always play as the guy with the American flag on his back, because heck yeah, America. But yeah, though, again, like, me sucking at this game was just because of my own inadequacies, and not because of the controller's fault, in my opinion. Lastly, I'm showing some Sin and Punishment, and this is a game I've played through, I don't know, like 8 times at this point. I absolutely love this game, and every time I've played through it, I've been using this controller, and this is a game that will definitely put some wear on your N64 analog sticks. And again, the controller's held up just fine after playing through this game several times, and that's a big thing I really want to stress about this controller is the build quality on it. As I said while we were looking at the controller and everything, it's really good. It just feels really solid. It feels really nice in the hands. It does not feel cheap and plasticky, which was one of my biggest complaints with the Brawler Pad 64, is how hollow and empty that controller felt. This controller does not feel that way, which is a very big plus for it. Lastly, I figured I would go over the price for this controller. It's $24.99, which I think is incredibly fair when you consider that a Nintendo 64, a first-party controller, will run you around $15, and that's a used controller, so this is only around $10 more, and it's also $15 cheaper than the Retro Fighters Brawler 64 pad, and it also feels way better built than the Retro Fighters 64 Brawler pad, and it's also a lot cheaper than the HoriPad Mini controller, which will net you around $60 to $70 US currently. So I think for the price of $25, I think that's incredibly fair for these controllers. Lastly, I don't know if these are compatible with the expansion pack or not for the Nintendo 64, so I'm not sure if you have one of those, if Pokemon Stadium or Mario Tennis, one of those games that supports the expansion pack, if those will work on this controller or not. I figured I would mention that just because I don't see expansion pack support anywhere on here, but you know, it's worth mentioning as a few games do support it. Alright, so overall, can I recommend the Retro Tribute 64 controller? And the answer is definitely yes. I really love this controller. It's become my default or go-to Nintendo 64 pad. I've even sold my old HoriPad 64 just because I liked playing on this one more. And yeah, it's just a really good controller. I really recommend it. It almost makes up for my disappointment in the Brawler 64 pad. So if you had to choose between this or the Brawler pad, go with this one. It's cheaper, it's better designed, it feels better and everything like that. And yeah, it's just a better controller overall. If you had to go with this or the HoriPad though, a little bit of a toss-up. I'd probably go with the HoriPad, honestly, just because the HoriPad's a little bit more collectible. You'll probably be able to make your money back from selling it down in the future like I did. But if it was this or the original N64 pad or the Brawler, I'd definitely go with this. I just like it that much. But yeah, so that was today's episode of Controller Chaos, you guys. If you liked it, like it down below, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, YouTube. And, have a wonderful day, you guys. Peace.